the Isle of Man's largest collection of locally produced podcasts, available for free on manxradio.com.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Faster by, good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Manx Radio. Sorry about the weather, but I'm sure it'll get better. We're open line today. Text, call, email and WhatsApp. You call 66 13 68. Text and WhatsApp 166 177. Email studio@manxradio.com. Well, MHK is continuing to consider clauses for the assisted dying bill. In Keys at the moment, they have expert witnesses they've been calling, and you can hear it all on AM 1368 and the AM DAB as well. Chief Minister says it's a fallacy to think that assisted dying legislation wouldn't change, but wouldn't be completely set in stone. The Keys are discussing the controversial bill again today. And I don't know whether you spotted this morning on BBC television, Alfred Cannon told the medical editor Fergus Walsh why he thinks a referendum should be held to decide whether or not it's implemented on the Isle of Man.
It alters that social contract that currently exists between the state and the people, in that the delivery of healthcare not only now becomes about the delivery of life, the succour for life, the prescription of drugs to keep us healthy and look after our welfare, but it also now effectively proposes to change the role of the state so that it now provides for assisted suicide and effectively assisted dying. That's a serious fundamental shift. It puts a lot of changes in terms of emphasis. It changes the way doctors potentially work. It changes the way we view our healthcare system. It potentially puts pressure on the sick and the terminally ill, and has other impacts throughout society. So my view is this needs careful consideration, and ultimately I will be pushing to put this to the public vote if indeed this legislation passes.
So a referendum, how would that work? I mean, if we're going through the process of asking elected members here to make this decision, why a referendum?
I believe that if you're going to change that social contract, if you're going to change the way the healthcare service fundamentally operates, you must have a full and proper mandate. And it's not only is a critical issue, but also, I think it is a fallacy and misleading to state that this legislation is somehow protected and limited. The evidence is that this will change under pressure, either from the courts or from public opinion or by legislation, and will extend further out. So the people must also be cognizant and aware that there is every chance that this legislation will change, and that referendum, of course, can take place in a number of forms and a number of formats, and we have plenty of opportunity to either do it as a standalone issue or coincide that with either local or national elections.
So what do you think? That's the Chief Minister, although, of course, his idea of a referendum is put down as an amendment in his capacity as a constituency MHK for Ayr and Michael, as Alfred Cannon MHK rather than Alfred Cannon Chief Minister, because at the moment it's a parliamentary matter and not a government matter. Incidentally, whether you've been looking the coverage on television, one of the witnesses, Baroness Finlay, we talked about. Baroness Finlay was on Mannin Line, an entire Mannin Line last June. I don't know whether you remember. She was on, as was Trevor Moore. They were talking about assisted dying on the Isle of Man. The whole of Britain at the moment is looking at the Isle of Man and our potential assisted dying bill. We'll see what happens. And, of course, if you have a view, it is more than welcome by text, call, email and WhatsApp. Alan, just regarding Peel, I think it's wrong that a certain big building firm and the government are trying to force a huge amount of new houses on Peel. Peel people don't want any more building, says Alan. on 867. Well, if it's got through the process, Alan, I don't really see what you can do. Peel has now changed out of all proportion as to what it used to be. Of course, downtown Peel is still as it ever was. But go out on the roads on the way out, and it's just houses and houses. Double yellows in Williston. We still need a speed limit sign and try and stop cars and vans parking on the pavement. That means you, post office, says Texter 110, not the post office. Just regarding that assisted dying bill, you can hear coverage on AM 1368. Daphne says, good afternoon, everybody. These are Daphne's words, let me tell you. I call it medical murder. Our medical fraternity don't seem to have much time for those over the age of 65 years of age, says Daphne. Well, I don't speak for the medical fraternity, but I'm assuming that many people don't. Many people aren't in favour of. In fact, lots of medical practitioners have said they aren't in favour of the assisted dying legislation. But that's your opinion, Daphne, and of course you're more than welcome to it on an opinion programme. Nobody seems to have figured out what this is going to do to Manx Care. The government said that this won't be operated by Manx Care. So if the state isn't going to do this, and would you want the state to do it anyway, who's going to do this? What would this do for recruitment for an organisation like Manx Care if we have this? Dr. Allinson was on yesterday, and lots of follow-up too. There were lots and lots of messages in to Dr. Allinson yesterday. Apologies if I didn't get to yours, but we had lots of phone calls and lots of messages. The way to fund the NHS is to The way to fund the NHS, stop buying so many drugs and get people to eat better and less sugar in food, which is the main reason people get sick, says Des. We were talking yesterday about the sugar tax, and thank you for the person who raised that, because I'd almost forgotten about the sugar tax. It's the soft drinks levy, and we raise about £1 million. Didn't know that, but about £1 million is raised for the obesity programs, particularly childhood obesity. And as from yesterday, I'm a pensioner and I pay more tax than a lot of people, apart from the tax I paid while I was at work. Yes, I own my own house, and if you're interested in people's health, it's the companies tax you to tax the amount of sugar in their products. As for training people to take less sugar, it's impossible, because a Diet Coke is the same price as a full sugar Coke. And diet drinks, says another correspondent, diet drinks also have additives in it, which the internet is full of. If you just look up aspartame on the internet, and you'll be there all morning long. So I don't know whether you agreed with what Dr. Allinson had to say yesterday. We were talking about raising the population by 15,000. It's the mantra at the moment to get to 100,000 population on the Isle of Man, to stimulate growth, to stimulate the economy, to get where we need to be in the future for stuff that's going to get paid. As for the pensioners' increase, says 272, for me, I got 7%, my wife got 4.5%, nowhere near the 8.5% increase that was promised on 272. Thanks also to the correspondent talking about Castle Rushen, and we got to the bottom of Castle Rushen yesterday, somewhere between 52 million and 62 million for the entire project, including the new sports hall and the swimming pool. Lily said, I left Castle Rushen in 1998, and the whole time I was there were buckets in the corridors collecting water. My child's going to be starting there in September, and the buckets are probably still there. Castle Rushen High School is a great school, but the building needs urgent attention. I wonder how safe those roofs are if they've been leaking that long. Castle Rushen, you're right, Castle Rushen, by a common agreement, Castle Rushen is a great school. It's just that the building is very, very tired. And how long is it going to be before Castle Rushen High School is, and Dr. Anderson mentioned, they're going to do it, or to put the new school there, as well. It's on the same site, as well as the original school being there. We can't cope with 85,000 people, says Texter 614. How are we going to manage with 100,000? I think it is a ridiculous, stupid idea. That's the words of 614. Thank you, 614. It just happens to be government policy. That's all. That's what they want to do. Their opinion is, and the Ireland plan is, that we have to grow. We have to grow the economy because we have to pay for stuff. Thanks also to Peter, who just said, well, if they're that bothered about money, why don't they just allow the Kroger gas people to go ahead and drill, get the gas, and make the promised billions out of it? Then we wouldn't have any problems. And what about that money that's supposed to be coming from Ørsted when they lease the offshore wind? Fred on 807 dropped a note in to say, Andy, it's time the government stopped messing about with the assisted dying bill. The island stands to make a fortune from this, as people will come from the UK. They need to legalise cannabis, and that will make the island a lot of revenue too. But the government don't see... He used another word for the government, but it's disparaging, so I'll let you fill in your own in the gap. But these people can't see past the end of their own noses. We need to wise up, Manx government. So make assisted dying legal, as people would come from the UK. To do what, Fred? To end their life? How would that make us money? And what would it do for our reputation? They've said already there's going to be a residency rule for assisted dying if it happens. You can't just pitch up. You have to live here. You have to be a Manx resident to avail yourself of the service itself. So anyway, maybe you know something we don't know, Fred. And also legalising cannabis. Now, is that medicinal cannabis or is that recreational cannabis? Just if you be a bit more specific, we'll get to the bottom of that. And thanks also to... can anybody explain what this sign is meant to be? Obviously, it should be Claddocks, but even the is confused. No overnight camping this side of the Claddocks, says this. I don't know whether you've noticed, by the way, that the campsite at the Claddocks, they've got those very posh portaloos. I think there are 4, possibly 5 portaloos. And it was a year ago, didn't a building company offer to give them an actual block of toilets? But it's there, and it's going to be there for TT. Maybe they're going to change them and put some posh ones in. Talking about cutting down on sugar, I never knew just how much sugar a local restaurant, puts in a tikka masala until a good friend told me. Apparently it's a massive amount of sugar put in a tikka masala. Anonymous 820. Well, part of the problem with food that we purchase is the additives that we don't know that are in there. And certainly lots and lots of food has lots of sugar in it, and also lots of salt. Lots of sugar, lots of salt means sometimes it tastes quite nice. And Mandy says, you haven't talked much about VAT, and you didn't bring it up yesterday with Dr. Allinson. I do apologise. We did have lots to get through yesterday, but only with an hour. There are some things we didn't touch. We didn't even get to the hospitality industry yesterday. There's been much discussion in the hospitality sector about this possible drop in the Isle of Man in value-added tax, VAT, to help business cope. And everybody, particularly the hospitality sector, is asking when we can drop VAT, when that can come down. It seems, from what the government says, the Manx government has its arms tied. The government just can't drop VAT, not because VAT earns us quite a bit of money, which it does, but because of the close relationship the Isle of Man has with the UK VAT regime. let's get some detail. I think John Moss has got the detail on VAT.
If you feel unhappy about VAT, well, look across the channel. The French came up with this form of added tax in 1954. Mon Dieu, they said, that's a good idea, or the French equivalent. It arrived in the UK in 1973 after President de Gaulle, the late President de Gaulle, could no longer say non, and Britain under Ted Heath became a member of the then common market. For some time, the Isle of Man enjoyed is the word, a relationship with the UK called the Common Purse Agreement. It paid cash to the UK coffers, and then the UK handed a sum back. Quite a large sum back. It was when certain other jurisdictions started complaining loudly that the UK looked again and suggested a more detailed check of what should be flowing back to the island should be looked at. Checks are now carried out regularly. It's called FIRSA. The acronym is Final Expenditure Revenue Sharing Arrangement, to make sure the UK are not being either parsimonious or, most likely, say critics, too generous. When the hospitality sector gathered in the Manx Museum a few weeks ago, the Treasury Minister, Alex Allinson, responded to appeals to drop the VAT to help hospitality cope. This is what he told the sector.
VAT brings in around about 28% of the total government budget. I know that UK Hospitality, the lobby group in the UK, have been arguing with their Treasury Minister about bringing it down to 12.5%. And obviously during COVID, we brought it down deliberately to make sure we could support the hospitality industry, small businesses. But it is a significant part of government income, more so in many ways than income tax. But we definitely are looking at VAT. One of the issues that I'm sure you'll be aware of is this year we're going through the recalculation with the UK called FIRSA. So we had the Household Income and Expenditure Survey now going out to businesses as well. So later on this year is critical in terms of knowing how much of that common VAT pot we get. We've seen in the past when the UK government have reassessed that and the impact it can have on government services.
You'll note that Dr. Allinson started by referring to the non-inconsiderable sum in VAT the Isle of Man relies on. If that was cut for any reason, the government would have to look elsewhere for the cash to do its housekeeping. The island could be said, if not to live off the VAT of the land, then definitely to lean heavily upon it.
What do you think about this? We can't just opt out, so we could abolish it, I suppose, and do what Jersey did, put in a purchase tax. But you can't just change it. I mean, we can do what we want, but of course it will have implications, and particularly with that common purse. David's with us now. Hi, David.
Hi, Andy. I just want to give out some bouquets, really, about the most exciting bit that's happened for us for a while was bringing the rally over and seeing all those classic cars being here from years ago, TR7s, old Escorts, big bore sounds, and probably the smell of Castrol R as well, which we haven't smelled for a while. But a big bouquet out to the people who organised that.
And we had the weather for it, didn't we?
It was absolutely gorgeous. You'd think you were in the Riviera, and you'd see how many posts. I mean, there were thousands of posts of people putting photographs up of cars and certain places where cars can leap and thing. They had a great time, as far as I'm aware anyway. I wasn't involved with it at all. But it just shows you what we can do on the island. And the disappointing thing, well, I'm just going to say the other thing too is coming up, is to do with football. Now, under the auspice of FC Isle of Man, we're going to have probably the Steam Packet tournament back again. So we're going to have something to do with all those pitches. And we got the bowl there. We own the bowl, don't we? The taxpayer owns the bowl. And we're going to have all those matches there. And we're going to start dragging people in. So we need to toughen up on the boat. And we need to make the place look a bit more tidier. And the grass on the promenade, I don't know how many dock leaves are going to come up. Maybe they're going to start selling it as an anti-thing for ginny nettle stings.
Yeah, free dock leaves. Regarding the Steam Packet, I mean, in fact, I'll tell you now, a week tomorrow, a week on Wednesday, FC Isle of Man are going to be on Mannin Line. We're going to be talking about the progress that's been made with FC Isle of Man, where they want to go. And we'll talk about this festival of football that they've got and how big they want it to be. But it's it's just, as you say, we're getting people coming over from Chester. Chester FC are coming over. It's just when those people start looking at the steam packet prices, if they want to bring a car plus two, and what they're going to think when they see that.
Yes. The other thing too, don't forget we still own it. The taxpayer does own it, only it's an arm's length company. We got all these other arm's length companies. But how are we quantifying how much benefit we get out when you use taxpayers' money to buy them? And the Housing Board is another one. And we got the Health Service Board. You look at the opening up of Summerhill Views. What's going on there? I can't understand it. When it's okay to get your jab there, but people can't transfer from Retina Bay.
Okay, I appreciate that, David.
Bye-bye.
Good to hear from you. Thanks. 27 minutes past 12 on Manx Radio. A notice in from Hector. Thank you, Hector. He dropped me a note in to say, I think sometimes we underplay and we undersell the TT and things that we do. And this is interesting regarding what David's just said about what was a splendid weekend of rallying on the Isle of Man. Of course, the weather helped enormously, but it looked great. Everybody seemed to have a good time. And sometimes, says Hector, we do underprice it. He said, I was looking at it, looking at the Formula One Grand Prix and how much a weekend would cost to go away for a Formula One Grand Prix. Now, we're not saying that Formula One Grand Prix equate to the TT, but it's just interesting to see how much a weekend ticket is for the Grand Prix. If you go to the Singapore Grand Prix, a weekend ticket's £2,600. A 3-night hotel stay in Singapore, £1,000. So that weekend's going to cost you £3,600 odd pounds. Go to the most expensive one, it's the Las Vegas Grand Prix this year. An average weekend ticket for the Las Vegas Grand Prix, £3,828. Average 3-night hotel stay in Vegas, £2,300, going to cost you $6,180. Average weekend cost for the Las Vegas Grand Prix, plus flights. So we've got something worth selling, says Hector, and we really shouldn't underprice it. Lots of people come here, have got money, and they're willing to spend it. It's just that we have to give good service and good value. If you give good service and good value, people are happy. Why is legislative time being spent on removing the bishop's vote when the focus should be on legislation that will help constituents, says Caroline W. And a message in regarding Amsterdam. We talked about Amsterdam last week and legalising recreational cannabis. And this correspondent says Amsterdam is suffering because of the rampant sex industry rather than the licensing of cannabis. I did mention that many Amsterdammers hate the cannabis industry and don't like their beautiful, historic, artistic city full of people just turning up because they want to eat a hash cake. I'd rather have the street full of stoned people who want to chill out, says this correspondent, rather than a street full of drunks with all the aggression and violence that goes with it. I recently booked a 4-day trip on the Seacat to Liverpool, costing £480 for a car and 4 passengers. Why would anybody want to travel here when you're faced with a cost like that, says Pam. Surely there's something we can do to incentivise people, maybe give them a voucher to spend when they come here as soon as they buy the ticket. So at least it seems to be good value. Is it true that if you travel on the steam packet, your car's not insured against damage while on board, says David? Seems to be what we heard from that correspondent. I think it was David who dropped a message on the answer phone, who said that he was on that 16th of April sailing that bounced across and has been told now to go to his own insurance company, having been spoken to by a member of staff on board saying, tell us all the details. Maybe that was just to get him off the boat. But apparently you, in the terms and conditions buried away, that is there, David. on 425. No point building more houses in Peel. All the jobs are in Douglas. The A1 road is a crawl in the morning and the evening rush hours. So they need to expand building in and around Douglas, Glenvine, Crosby. Then it would save the planet a bit, says Noel. Fair point. Or maybe Paul drops a note in to say, if you're going to do that in Peel, just bring back and electrify the Peel to Douglas railway. Call it a tram. Call it an electric tram. It's electric. It'll save the world. Dr. Allenson affirmed policy was to create new jobs to attract new residents. No mention of reducing the size of government, which will grow exponentially with the population, says G313. I'm confused. The hospitality sector's crying out for help as it's in dire straits, yet a new restaurant just opened in Port St Mary and another 2 about to open in Ramsey. If things are that bad, how come more businesses are opening up? I think, says Confused on 843, there are too many restaurants here for such a small island. Good friend who's a restaurateur who told me there are only a certain amount of people who will come out, particularly on a Friday and Saturday night. Whether or not that's increased now, but do you think there are too many restaurants, too many cafes in the daytime? It seems everywhere you go now there's a cafe or a coffee shop every other shop. Yes, it's good to see the rally back, says Ian. I'm in favour more so than the TT. Can the organisers please advise the drivers not to practice at 10:30 at night unannounced, scaring animals with their gunshot-sounding exhaust? It was Balath Thursday night. I loved the rally, but please don't spoil it, says Ian. I had a few of those, and that's what it was. I just thought it was the normal hot hatches tazzing around. Legalising cannabis, says 068, would destroy the Isle of Man. How desperate would we need to be to legalise cannabis? We're talking about recreational cannabis. So filling up the place with drug addicts, it would finish our society off and nobody would want to live here then. Thank you, 068. It's funny, lots of people propose the idea that recreational cannabis, and they point to places like Amsterdam and I think Portugal most recently as being the way forward, in several states in America where it happens. If you've got any thoughts, and particularly if you've been to a place where legalised cannabis is smoked de rigueur in the street, in cafes and restaurants, let us know. Why do we have to pay for a Newcastle Russian high school? My high school was brick-built in the 1920s and still in use today in the UK. Surely there should be a rolling campaign to improve and update room by room as required, not just to build a new school, says Dave. On the same tack, thank you, Shirley, you dropped a note in to say the oldest school on the Isle of Man is King William's College, and that looks great. Is it because they actually maintain the building and don't let it rot away? Palliative care is becoming big business, says D on 555. So which side of the fence are you, D? Is it palliative care as in palliative end-of-life care, as in assisted dying, or palliative care preserving life? We haven't yet heard also, thank you, Ted, who just said, we haven't heard really a definitive answer from what the hospice stands to gain or lose from assisted dying. So could we have a word from hospice really as to, what it is they think should happen? Southern Andy on 580, is it not time for a complete revision of the management structure of the steam packet? Following the appalling review by Which, that's the Consumers Association magazine, Which magazine, of the steam packet performance, the response by management was total denial of any failing. The current management seem proud of their discount scheme and its beneficial attributes to island residents of avoiding excessive costs. They see a 5-day discount to tourists as beneficial, How is it beneficial to the island businesses? It just reduces the time that tourists stay on the Isle of Man. How intelligent is this policy to reduce the time that tourists spend on the island and supported by the Treasury? Southern Andy on that. That was the Steam Packets review in Which magazine last week. Put it at the bottom of the pile. Regarding the rally, the traffic jams in the south of the island were horrendous, and I thought the warning signage was abysmal, says 753. Where was it, 753, in a particular place? Steam Packet had the cheek to up the prices of nighttime sailings. I'm very disappointed, says 470. Is it true, says Eric on 110, that the Liverpool Arms has been sold by the brewery? It would be great to have that hospitality venue opened again, or was there not a covenant on it to say that it couldn't be opened up as alcohol selling? We'll find out, but if the Liverpool Arms has been sold, nice to hear that. Thanks to John Moss for explaining the background to VAT. The thing is, what happens now the UK has left the European Union? It was a European tax, TVA, in France, adopted by Britain in the 1970s and consequently by us. But if the UK is not in the EU, they'd have to change the name, wouldn't they? I'm trying to think. There was a purchase tax years and years ago before. Do you remember last week we were talked about a Range Rover Evoque that had been stolen? Apparently, it's been found. Nearly a week later, but that Range Rover Evoque has been located, thanks to the constabulary for telling us. Thanks to 588, who tells me the Steam Packet, 17th of June to the 23rd of June, Car Plus One has gone from £389 to £435. Same date, return Aberdeen to Shetland on Northlink with sleeping pod, £345. It's a 12-hour crossing. Same dates on Calmac, Ullapool to Stornoway, return £150. So where will you choose if you're in the UK and you want an island break? That message in from 588. Are we making it easy for people to come here? It's been said, and members of the hospitality trade have said, we don't want to dive down market. We don't want to make it cheap as chips to come to the Isle of Man. We don't want to be that sort of destination, say some people. So how do you legislate against that? What do you do? Let's just say the Steam Packet charges for a Car Plus One, that certain amount, would it be beneficial for the government or the hospitality industry to throw in a book of vouchers? So you're paying £450, but you get £100 of hospitality vouchers that you can spend. So there's the implication that it's a lot cheaper. Thank you, Des. Desmond's got some inside track. He said there are more druggies going around the Isle of Man than most people know. How do you know, Des? Just a thought. Thank you for that. All states where cannabis is legal regret the move to legislation, says Mark. Is this the United States? Only those who use cannabis illegally now want it legalised. If you go to these places, you'll find drug addicts lying around in city centres. Crime is worse, not lower, and the social costs from dealing with the addiction vastly increase. No, I don't think we should legalise a harmful drug, says Mark. What do we say to people who think that we should? It's obvious. Go into any town Friday or Saturday night, stick your nose in the air and smell, and it won't be longer than 10 minutes before you smell that whiff of cannabis. It seems to be everywhere at weekends. So is it a minority who are just walking around a lot, or are they more people? My wife and I are away for a trip in August in the car, 951 text. Just the two of us outside the time of any motorcycle racing or big events. £660, which I find disgusting, says 951. And also a message in, it's harder to sail at night in the dark, says Des. Ha ha. Thank you, Desmond. Have you seen that new Charles Gard video? It's interesting. Welcome back to the Isle of Man. Really interesting. He revisited the things he raised in another of the videos, says John in Farm Hill. Yes, we've had a few mentions of that. And legalising cannabis, in my opinion, is a bad idea, says Texter 820. Drug driving will increase tenfold. Drug driving is just as bad as drink driving. Again, in my opinion, I don't want to walk down the street or drive on the road and see people off their faces, says 820. Do you think this is necessarily the way that society is going? And do you think... Many people say that cannabis, the use of cannabis, is a gateway into harder drugs. Certainly, you're entering the criminal fraternity when you buy recreational cannabis. No ifs, buts or maybes. You're in on the in. You may be at the end of the nexus, but at the other end of that nexus is organised crime. So you're funding crime. So who's going to make the decision whether we legalise recreational cannabis or continue to criminalise it? It is a societal problem. And you and I are society, so what do we do?
You get more at the Mannin. Yes, the Mannin Hotel is a fantastic destination. Whether meeting up with friends for coffee, enjoying a fabulous meal, or memorable celebration, the Mannin has it all. And don't forget the Mannin for breakfast occasions and get-togethers in a fabulous setting right in the heart of Douglas, just off the promenade on Broadway. And for a special occasion, a Mannin gift voucher makes the perfect present to spend on food and accommodation. You get more at the Mannin. See online for details.
When you save a little money, it means a lot these days.
If you're looking for bathrooms and tiles, you'll always find something new in store at Pacesetter. For surprisingly affordable prices and excellent choice, search online for Pacesetter Douglas. Or better still, visit the Pacesetter Bathroom and Tile Showroom on Harris Terrace and see the new styles in store.
You can get the best of everything, where the price is twice as nice.
Island Hearing Limited, your local hearing care specialist since 2009, with branches in Port Erin and Ramsey. We provide the very latest hearing aid technology available, which you can try at home, with excellent aftercare and a wax removal service available using microsuction. Give us a ring on 830 722 or visit Island Hearing at One Station Road, Port Erin. We're happy to help. Island Hearing, always listening.
What are you doing in there?
I'm training for the Isle Listen Tough Mugger. I'm in it to win it this year.
Oh, aye? And how's sitting in me cow trough going to help you?
I'm acclimatising myself, toughening up my mind and my body.
Does it work?
Oh, aye.
Right, move over. Register now for Isle Listen's Tough Mucker. #More Than Mud. This advert is brought to you by Island Escapes and your nation station, Manx Radio.
Tonight at 6 o'clock here on Manx Radio, join Kiri Kermode and myself, Simon Clark, from the new series of Countryside.
I caught up with Brian O'Neill, the Secretary of the Federation of Young Farmers, to hear about the up-and-coming Stockman of the Year.
And I went along to Ballyocky Farm in Reggaby to find out how Alan Radcliffe was getting on his farm. And also I popped along to Balaff Bowling Club, who are celebrating 40 years, to see how their new extension to the clubhouse was looking.
That's all in Countryside here on Manx Radio at 6 o'clock. And don't forget, you can download and subscribe to the podcast for free at manxradio.com.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Fastermite, it's 1:45 now. There's still plenty of mist over Douglas. I don't know about you and what it's like on the mountain road, so do take care. Alan says, Andy, I'm of the opinion that the use of cannabis should be legalised on the Isle of Man. Germany is the latest country to decriminalise its use, and households can grow up to 3 plants at any one time. Cannabis, I think, is a far safer drug than alcohol, and it's impossible to overdose on cannabis. It's just a very very pleasant way of relaxing, spending an evening at home after a hard day at work. It's bound to be legalised at some time in the future, so I say do it now and stop giving its users a criminal record for the rest of their lives. Thanks for that, Alan. It's good to hear from you. And also, can somebody, please, if anybody has access to data about vehicle fuel usage on the Isle of Man, is it possible that we have more cars and this is generating more tax revenue the government may be keeping quiet as it goes against the green agenda? Says that. And thanks also to Richie, who said it was brilliant to hear Frank Whedon yesterday, the Isle of Man's Chief Constable. He was Chief Constable between 1972 and 86 as part of your archive. Fantastic. More of it, please, says Richie. Thank you, Richie. And Julian's on. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Andy. How you doing?
Fine, thanks. I wish you to brighten up a bit.
I know. I think it's coming. It looks a little bit bluer to the south, so I think by this afternoon it will warm up and nice sunshine, so something to look forward to, and I think it's all right for a couple of days after that.
Yeah. Okay.
Am I to assume that the two vehicles that have been stolen recently, there's no updates on that?
Yes, they found the Range Rover. The Range Rover Evoque has been found.
Oh, interesting. The only reason I ask is, and it's sort of related, I noticed one of the largest data aggregators in the world, they do everything from, the happiness index of a country, but they also do safety and crime indexes. And I noticed for years, the Isle of Man has been holding it about fourth, but this 5 months just gone to May, it slipped 2 places to 6th and dropped a couple of points on the overall index in the 100 countries that are listed. Just kind of interesting that, because they do various metrics with what's gone on with crimes, everything from car theft all the way through to burglaries and all the rest of it.
And whereabouts is the table, Julian?
This is called Numbeo, Numbeo. If you just put in something along the lines of safety index by country, it will come straight up. And they're the longest sort of established one. Some of the other ones are a bit variable, but I tend to look at that one because they've been going for so long, and they're one of the largest ones, so they've got a lot of metrics that they look at.
And who's above the Isle of Man?
You've got Andorra, Oman has just appeared, Qatar and Taiwan, which is an interesting mix. But some of the other ones have slipped quite a lot. I noticed, you go back 20 years, Sweden was up with us, and now they're down at number 87. I think I noticed that Sudan and Uganda are actually less bad than Sweden is at the moment for some amazing reason. I read somewhere that there are 61 areas that they're calling them vulnerable areas in Sweden, and there's 19 of them that are no-go areas for the police.
Well, they've got terrible problems with gang violence, with drug violence, haven't they?
That's right, yeah. It's been a very big change. I mean, I was down in Malmo, Stockholm, Jönköping, Gothenburg years and years ago, and it was lovely wandering around, but I'm not so sure these days.
Yeah, well, apparently I've been told that Range Rover Evoque has been found, but it's a write-off. So it sounds like somebody took it. And it's funny how can I put this gently? Most people who know the Isle of Man well know that stealing a car isn't common. It doesn't really happen here. So to have 2 cars stolen in a week would indicate that something's going on somewhere.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about the Isle of Man, because people do tend to keep an eye out for each other, and people look around and see things, and it's, who knows, something might come of it, and we'll find out who it is that's done this. But it's just a case of just keeping your eyes open, I suppose, and just be a little bit more aware that you can get a bit complacent. I mean, people don't necessarily lock the cars, or they're not even the front door sometimes. And days gone by, it was never really considered a big problem. But I don't know.
Okay, so it's Andorra, Oman, Qatar, Taiwan, and the Isle of Man in that order.
Something like that. I haven't actually got it. I'm out at the moment, so it's something along that line.
Okay. Julian, you don't have to answer this, but are you a CIA agent at all?
No.
Okay. I only say that. There's nothing nefarious. It's just that somebody once said to me that there is such a thing as the CIA kidnap risk list. And apparently, according to them, the Isle of Man is number one for being the place in the world where you are least likely to be kidnapped.
There you go. Well, there's always a positive to the Isle of Man. I mean, this is something we've talked about, isn't it? We've got that bit of water. We've got, it seems, our own ability to legislate. So, we can... I seem to remember a few MHKs have said that we can do whatever we want, really, within reason. So, there's always ways to make sure that the fortifications, you might say, stay up and don't get lowered too much.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Enjoy the sunshine when it arrives. Thanks, Julian.
Thanks, Andy. Cheers.
Well, maybe they should put that on those posters, because a lady said we used to... Oh, no, it was Rich who said we used to advertise down in the south of England. For years, we used to advertise the Isle of Man on the London Tube, and you can't get a bigger southern city than that. Maybe that'll be the future then. The Isle of Man, the place where you are least likely to be kidnapped.
Hello, this is Doug Farragher. In conjunction with Manx Radio, I'd like to invite you to join us and learn something about our native Gaelic tongue, the language of man.
8 minutes before 1, the rally brings a huge amount of cash spent on the Isle of Man, but the government doesn't help it financially, says Alan on 867. It will be interesting to see. I mean, there were lots and lots of machinery, and they would have spent hundreds of thousands of pounds coming to the island on the boats. The price you quoted for the steam packet, and we should give tourists some vouchers to offset that cost. What about the poor locals? What benefit do we get from the ever-increasing steam packet costs, says Ian. Fair point. But then again, we've got that little warm part of our hearts that knows that we own it, Ian. I know it doesn't help. Anyone who moans about traffic jams should get a free ferry crossing on the condition they do a circle of the M25 at rush hour. After 8 hours of being sat in a jam, like I did, let's see if they moan about 5 minutes wait at Quarterbridge in the morning. Thank you, 134. Everything's relative, isn't it? Jams in Colby and Ballabeg, queues of vehicles having to turn round at Ballaceckan and the Slough roundabout because apparently the signs were in the wrong place, says 753 for the rally at the weekend. I think the Isle of Man is awash with drugs already, says 935. Well, I don't know about awash, 935, but everywhere in the Western world there are drugs. It's fatuous to suggest that they aren't there. There are pushers everywhere on the Isle of Man. You just need to know them. Magistrates, deemsters have talked about this in the past and the sentencing powers that they have, and the fact that you end up criminalising very young children, teenagers, and giving them a criminal record because they fall into bad company. And if you know how to get us out of that, then you should be in Keys. As well as the cost of the steam packet needs to sort out reliability. I was dumped off the Mannin at midnight 45 in the morning from the Sunday sailing due to late departure and engine trouble. It's running on 3 out of 4 engines at the moment. This seems to be the norm at the moment. So what will tourists do when they're stranded in the middle of the night in a strange town? Do the guest houses, hotels stay open for them to check in? Can they get transport to other towns and be refunded the considerable cost by the steam packet for this, says Sue. Has the government filled their AI position that they were advertising? We've not heard so far. It was 120 odd thousand pounds, wasn't it? I was told, says Daphne, that the reason the potholes aren't being filled is to encourage people to stop using their vehicles. You're obviously in on the in. I think the problem is the price of the ferry, says Foster. It needs to be reduced by the government. It's too expensive. Infrequent return sailings for a short trip. I find the hotel prices high. When you compare this to flying from Belfast or Dublin to the Spanish resort, it's a no-brainer. Foster's in Tandragee in County Armagh. It's too expensive to get to and stay on the Isle of Man. The Go Explore card is good value when you get to the island, buses and all the transport, including trams and museums. Thank you, Foster. Good to hear from you. All I'll say is comparing the Isle of Man to the Spanish resort is it's kind of the law of false equivalence. We're many things, but we're not a Spanish resort.
Tune in and chill out with Chris Pearson on Manx Radio.
Make the most of those long, light evenings with the Manx Radio Chill Out Show, Sunday nights from 7. Whether you're relaxing at home, out and about, or rounding off your work ends, you'll be more than welcome. Check out the tunes and email chill@manxradio.com.
The Sunday Chill Out. Chris Pearson, Manx Radio. The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Good to have you along. Thanks for joining in today. Remember, on AM 1368 and the AM player, you will be hearing the clauses part of the assisted dying legislation. Last week we were talking about the big lumps of concrete that have been put in Castletown, I think by Hango Hill. Jason Morehouse dropped me a note to say apparently it was the golf club that put the concrete blocks there. Is that right? In addition to Monday's look back in the archive, yesterday it was Frank Whedon, the Chief Constable between 72 and 86. This coming Friday, we're looking back to the 1981 general election. Sir Charles Carouche and Dr. Edgar Mann top the poll in Garth, and you'll hear it live as it happens. Fascinating. That's it. Back tomorrow with another open line on Manx Radio, live from King William's College on Thursday. Thanks to Chris Quirk on the phones today.
WINT